Hello and welcome to Access Asia with me, Angela Diffley. A look at our top stories this week. North Korea says it successfully launched its first ever reconnaissance satellite into orbit. The claim draws condemnation but also scepticism from neighbours. China says a surge in pneumonia-like illnesses among children is caused by reduced immunity following the lifting of COVID measures less than a year ago. And in our special report, how the Philippines is struggling to tackle its massive plastic pollution problem. Welcome to the programme. Well, the move has been greeted internationally both with condemnation and scepticism. North Korea claims to have successfully put its first ever reconnaissance satellite into orbit, and both the US and Japan have slammed it as a flagrant contravention of UN resolutions. Pyongyang followed up on its launch by firing a ballistic missile into the sea. That's one of about 100 such shows of strength this year. More on this from Antonia Kerrigan.
궤도에 진입한 것으로 평가합니다.
North Korea has said it's their legitimate right as a sovereign state. And after two failed attempts, now claim to have successfully launched a spy satellite into orbit.
To assess the success of this launch, it is crucial not only to determine whether the projectile entered orbit, but also its capability to take pictures with optical cameras and transmitting them appropriately to the satellite center. But after South Korean intelligence recovered debris from the second failed vessel which crashed into the sea, Western analysts are sceptical about the Malagyeong-1's ability to produce high-resolution images and transmit them to intelligence centres on Earth. While North Korean authorities claim that Kim Jong-un has already been able to view aerial footage of the American Andersen Air Base on the Pacific island of Guam, images which have not been made public. But even a successful launch would be significant for North Korea, for whom such a satellite could allow them to identify targets and surveil their neighbour in the event of war. Seoul says that if Pyongyang is to be believed, they could not have done it without the help of their Russian allies. The last failed attempt was recent, in August. And since then, leader Kim Jong-un and President Putin met at a Russian cosmodrome to talk cooperation.
I'm honoured that President Putin has shown such a deep interest and provided an opportunity to meet at a space launch facility at the heart of a space power, giving us a chance to gain a deeper understanding of a space nation's present and future.
Russia's eye thought to be on North Korea's ammunition stockpile for their war in Ukraine, and North Korea's focus on technical aerospace expertise, although both countries deny any such quid pro quo.
Well, to China now, where paediatric hospitals in the north of the country are reporting an overwhelming number of pneumonia-like illnesses. After being pressed for information by the World Health Organization, Beijing said that no unusual or novel pathogens have been detected. They reckon the surge is down to the lifting of COVID measures. This from Emerald Maxwell.
Hospitals in Beijing flooded with parents and kids awaiting checkups, as China sees clusters of pneumonia spreading in the north of the country, affecting mostly children. Enough to raise concerns at the World Health Organization, which requested data from the Chinese health authorities. On Thursday, they got an answer.
Chinese authorities advise that there has been no detection of any unusual or novel pathogens or unusual clinical presentations. They further stated that the rise in respiratory illness has not resulted in patient loads exceeding hospital capacities.
The spike in cases comes as China braces for its first full winter since lifting its strict COVID restrictions last December. An increase similar to what many other countries saw after easing their pandemic measures. Authorities attribute the outbreaks to the circulation of known pathogens, such as influenza, the virus that causes COVID-19, and Mycoplasma pneumoniae, a common bacterial infection which typically affects younger children.
Children's immune systems are not well developed. Their specific and non-specific immunity functions are not very mature, which may easily lead to infections.
The World Health Organization said it remained in close contact with authorities in China to monitor the situation. Next month marks 4 years since the first cases of COVID-19 were reported in Wuhan. Over the course of the ensuing pandemic, the WHO repeatedly criticized Chinese authorities for their lack of transparency and cooperation.
Russia is accused of targeting Central Asian migrants, either to beef up its ranks in the war in Ukraine or to work in Russian-occupied territories. Many migrants who used to work in Russia say they've had to return home in order to avoid going to Ukraine. Some say Russian authorities threatened to throw them behind bars for either real or fabricated offences.
Back home in Kyrgyzstan, Argen is 29. He's been expelled from Russia, officially because of irregularities in his papers. Unofficially, he says he refused to beef up the ranks of the Russian army.
When the Ukraine war started, Russian police began to check our ID constantly. People were arrested on the streets and were asked if they were going to serve in the army or not. Some were offered money to enroll and went off to war, but others fled.
There are no exact numbers on how many migrant workers left Russia. Some of those who did say Russian authorities bullied them into going to Ukraine, either to fight or to work in Russian-occupied territories, or else they'd go to prison. Central Asian countries rely on Russia economically. Some 1.3 million workers went to find a job there in early 2023. They don't need a visa, and many can already speak Russian.
I worked in Russia for 10 years. I used to get well paid there. If the war ends, I might go back to Russia.
Batir is an Uzbek journalist specializing in migration issues. He says migrants are an easy target for Moscow.
First of all, Russia itself has problems with human and labour rights. Our migrants are unprepared for what awaits them when they go abroad. For those who don't necessarily know the Russian language, they wouldn't know their rights. Many have not been to big cities. It's easier to fool them, to take advantage of them.
And it seems Moscow has other ways to lure workers, allegedly offering higher wages or even promising them Russian citizenship if they agree to work in annexed territories. Here in Kyrgyzstan's capital, express trains run every day to, quote, all cities in Russia.
Well, now to the scourge of plastic pollution, and nowhere is this problem more visible than in the Philippines. The archipelago's population of 114 million, spread across more than 7,000 islands, produces more than 1/3 of all the world's oceanographic plastic waste. And yet, more than 20 years after enacting a landmark waste management law in 2001, the country's failed to meet many of the targets set out in that legislation. Our reporters have more.
A city swallowed by piles of plastic. With over 13 million inhabitants, the capital Manila produces more than 9,000 tons of waste every single day. And it all starts at the market. Paper bags or cloth bags are nowhere to be seen. In a country where 18% of the population lives below the poverty line, it's more affordable to buy smaller quantities.
Filipinos like things that are cheap. They don't have money to buy in bulk like in the West. They need to save money.
The Pasig River, flowing right through the heart of Manila, is one of the most plastic-polluted rivers in the world. It's now turned into an open dump yard. Every typhoon season, it floods the homes along its banks as the garbage clogs the drainage system. Michael Dose, the head of this pumping station in southern Manila, had to find new ways to deal with this menace. He now has to collect the river's trash.
nagkaklag yung mga basura. Oh, grabe palang basura, no? Oh.
During the rainy season, we operate every day, filling up to 8 trucks in maybe 2 or 3 days. Plastic waste increases every year. If the government doesn't do anything, Manila will float on garbage.
Over the past 2 years, the government has launched a record-breaking cleanup drive with over 1 million tons of garbage removed from the river. But it's not enough to stop the trash from reaching the sea. This 200-kilometer Manila Bay is now completely defaced. Hundreds of bags of trash have been piling up on the beach for the past 2 months. Locals blame the municipality for not sending trucks to collect the garbage regularly. The rag pickers are the ones collecting the trash with their bare hands. Zero waste activist Joe works with rag pickers, the last barrier keeping the plastic out of the sea. Every day, each one of them collects around 20 kilos of plastic.
Once the garbage is wet, it cannot be sold. It's already become hard to segregate because it's contaminated and can bring all types of dangers to the health of villagers. All types of sickness, leptospirosis, typhoid.
It's painful to see that. It's so dirty. People used to swim here.
For now, there is no technology to clean microplastic from the seas and oceans. According to estimates by the European Parliament, there will be more plastic than fish in the oceans by 2050.
And finally, this week saw the Spagomi World Cup in Tokyo. And as you can see from the pictures, Spagomi is competitive litter hunting. And it really exists. The name's apparently a combination of the word sport and gomi, which means rubbish in Japanese. It was invented in Japan in 2008, and it's really caught on. 21 countries battled it out at the World Cup to collect the most rubbish within a set time limit, scouring the streets of Tokyo for plastic, any rubbish, especially cigarette butts, apparently, because they earn a team extra points because they are small. Anyway, Britain won the competition, and apparently 550 kilos of rubbish was collected altogether by the competitors. And that's it from Access Asia this week. That's it from me. Bye-bye.